Just for me, I've tried it both ways, and I cannot get the power of the reeds without having that wire on.
That's really interesting for me to know, because I've actually always wondered if you have a finished reed on the English horn that feels good, do you even bother to put the wire? My understanding was always, it's to make up for something like the opening. But I think that's a fallacy, right? A wire.
Yes, that's incorrect. And I think there's a lot of I would say be careful when you're ordering it from a double reed company, because often it's 26 gauge, which to me, that's thinner, does nothing. It has to be that 24 gauge.
Thanks for making that distinction.
This was a highlight to have you talk about wire in such a clear, transparent, and well-articulated, helpful manner. So thank you for taking the time to dive into this with us today and for our listeners, because I guarantee you that I'm going to try it, and I'm sure that they will also.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm glad to pass on this information I just got firsthand from Lou Rosenblatt. Yes. I'm really just passing on what he told me. But I mean, full disclosure, I have tried different ways because I thought, other people don't use it. But for me, it really is the answer to what I'm trying to produce, especially in orchestral playing.
And then as far as breaking in reeds, I think you mentioned that you try to not over scrape. Is there anything else that you could tell us about how you break in an English horn reed?
Credit Jonathan Blumenfeld, my colleague in the Philadelphia Orchestra, for telling me to try. The tying it on, scraping it, and then leaving it closed for a day, that's made a huge difference for me. And then if I have to, I can get a reed for a concert that night if I have to. That wouldn't be my preference, but I try to always have that available. I think a lot of people on your podcast have mentioned having reeds in different stages, and I think the more choice, the better. Reeds in different stages, reeds for different environments, if possible, different choices of cane. So the more you have to adapt to any situation is good.
Absolutely.
Do you have any wisdom to share regarding a healthy balance between practicing and reed making?
I feel it's important to do your practicing ahead of time, because you never know what you're going to be hit with atmospheres for the reed situation. Yeah. And as you get closer to an audition or performance, the reed becomes more critically important. I found this pandemic interesting, and for the first time in a long time, I haven't had that pressure of having to make reeds for concerts all the time. So honestly, I've been enjoying having some extra time just to practice more without the pressure of making reeds all the time. Not that I'm not making reeds, but less so because I don't have that constant pressure of, 4 concerts a week.
Now we know how flutists live and trumpet players.
Right.
Elizabeth, you've had several English horn concerti written expressly for you. Could you tell us a little bit about those works and maybe touch on how an English horn reed would differ from a concerto performance to a orchestral performance?
Yes, I've been lucky to be able to be involved with the commissioning and playing of several works for English horn, which I think every musician, if possible, should have the opportunity to go through that process. It's what keeps music alive and breathing. There's so many great composers out there, and instrument like English horn, which wasn't originally used as so much for chamber music and solo playing, could really use more repertoire. So I did premiere the Nicholas Maw Concerto with the Philadelphia Orchestra, and it was just a wonderful experience to work with the composer on the way. I've also had a few chamber music works written for me, and fairly recently Ranchvaran Concerto with Network for New Music. So I hope to be able to continue more of that.
I like that you point out that if we do have new works written for us, it's a way of keeping the music alive. It's really vital for our craft to be able to continue to have music written, especially an instrument like the English horn that composers don't readily consider to be a solo instrument. Well, we'd like to finish with one last question, and that is, if you would have any advice that you would give to your younger self.
One thing that seems basic, you need a reed light. Don't make reeds without a reed light. And one thing that I found really key is to have the humidity in the room that you're making reads, no matter what's going on outside or whether you're going to play outside, inside, altitude or not, but to have the room you're making the reeds ideally between 40 and 50% humidity.
Oh.
So in my studio, I have a dehumidifier and I have a humidifier, and I'm constantly monitoring that. Honestly, because I've found I've wasted so much time if I attempt to make reeds that are not at that humidity. And interestingly enough, I was reading that that's the ultimate humidity for viruses not to spread. One thing about equipment I wanted to mention that really made a big difference for me, and it came out fairly recently, is the micrometers that measure the inside of the reed. I have a mini micrometer from Inalati, and I got it maybe 5 years ago, and I only measure to a certain point on the micrometer the heart thickness on each side. But what I found is when I thought the heart looked to my eye, looked even, almost fairly consistently, the left side of the heart was a lot thinner than the right side of the heart. So once I learned the measurement, which on this micrometer to a certain point is 40 in the middle of the heart, that changed my reed making drastically, because I don't overscrape the heart and I even out the heart, and that just seemed to make it so much more consistent. And another interesting thing I found is it's the exact same measurement of the heart for oboe reeds as for English horn.
Oh my gosh, thank you. That's very interesting to know.
And this is, again, I guess, ultimately, so to your eye or just the feel, the English horn heart needs to be it's seemingly thinner, right? Because you would think it would be thicker compared to the oboe. But that's really helped me a lot. Just a caveat is it does seem like every micrometer is slightly different measurement. So you need to find the right measurement for your micrometer. But that's one thing I wish had been around when I was starting to make reeds. Oh, and one thing to mention is, so that's something I'm checking daily, because the heart can be even one day and it dries out, and then maybe one side grows a little bit more than the other. And so daily I'm evening that out. It's just been so huge for the balance once that's set, and then I can just finish the tip, and it just seems much more of a streamlined process with that added in.
Well, wonderful. That is excellent advice.
I also wanted to mention that the Philadelphia Orchestra's been doing a lot of creative things during the pandemic, and some of them are free. So I just hope everyone would take the time to check out their website. It's philorch.org, philorch.org. And also, I'm super excited because a new CD of Rachmaninoff won, and Symphonic Dances, which Symphonic Dances has quite a bit of English horn, is going to be released. That was recorded pre-pandemic, and I don't think anyone would argue that there's no orchestra in the world that would play Rachmaninoff better than the Philadelphia Orchestra. So I really think, look out for that. It's from Deutsche Grammophon.
Thank you for alerting us to that. And we can also put information on our Facebook page. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure speaking with you, and all of the historical knowledge that you bring to this interview, as well as just your years of experience playing the English horn, which many of us find sort of a daunting instrument. It's just so helpful for you to be here talking with us today. Thank you so much.
I really appreciate it. It's great to get to know both of you a little better, too. Thank you.
Elizabeth Starr Masoudnia, thanks so much for being our guest on Reed Talk today. And thanks to all of you for listening. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram, and subscribe to our podcast so you never miss an episode.
We'd love to hear from you. Send your reed-making questions for our guests to reedtalkpodcast@gmail.com. Sending good vibes from our Reed desk to yours. I'm Courtney Miller.
And I'm Margaret Marco.